Back pain is a massive problem. About 4 in every 5 people will experience at least one episode of disabling back pain at least once in their lifetime. If we then look at the numbers or the percentages of men and women who have chronic low back pain and report a reduction in their sex life, those numbers are also very high. So about 84% of men have reported reduced sexual frequency as a result of their back pain, and about 73% of women have reported the same.
Wow, those numbers are shocking. So what did your study actually specifically look at?
We looked at how the spine moves and also how active the muscles are during different sex positions.
And what did you hope to gain from this study?
Initially, our goal was to see if this was even feasible to do, and to then essentially be able to describe how the spine moves and how the muscles are active during sex, and compare those sex positions and come up with some guidelines for low back pain patients. Flexion intolerant patients and extension intolerant patients are the ones that we believe our recommendations are especially going to be able to help. So an individual with low back pain that is worsened by spine flexion movements, such as touching their toes or sitting for long periods of time, we consider them to be flexion intolerant. And extension intolerant patients are on the other end of that spectrum. So arching their back may hurt them, or lying on their stomach even may hurt them. And we would consider those patients to be extension intolerant.
So how did you physically get to measure this, to practice this? How did you conduct this study? It's quite an intimate thing.
Yes, it is. We actually did conduct this study in the lab. So we used 2 different systems to measure spine motion. One many people may be familiar with because it's used a lot in film, television, video games for full computer graphic character animation. And that's where reflective markers are placed all over a person's body. And we have special cameras that emit infrared light, which track the precise position of each of those markers in 3D space. So we are able to know exactly what position the spine is in every moment that the couples were having sex in the lab. We also measured muscle activity, and that was by attaching surface electrodes to the skin over top of core muscles and hip muscles.
That sounds really interesting. How did you get people to participate? Because, I mean, being British, we're quite prudish anyway, and we don't like talking about sex at the best of times, but to have people physically do it, how did you get that to happen?
Our recruitment was definitely challenging, but really only at first. We found a few couples that were very passionate about helping the cause and really wanting to contribute to science in this way. All of our couples had sexual experience with one another for about 5 years. Once we got our first few couples in, it seemed that those couples knew other couples who were willing. And from there, we were able to get 10.
Wow. So what did you find out about the best and worst positions for sexual intercourse and back pain then?
Well, we were able to come up with some general recommendations and then some more specific ones. We found that men and women use a lot of spine motion. And so our general recommendations and our specific ones are about changing how people move during sex and also how they position themselves. So to make any position more spine sparing, we recommend that the individual who's controlling the movement use more of their hips and knees rather than their spine. And for the individual who isn't controlling the movement, that they keep more of a neutral spine position. So a perfect example of this would be one of the positions that we studied, which is missionary. So the man is controlling the movement with pelvic thrusting. So our recommendations are essentially saying to use less of his spine and more of his hips and knees to do the pelvic thrusting. And for the woman who's lying on her back in the missionary position, that she use the back support underneath the natural curvature of her spine to maintain more of a neutral spine position.
What's the next step with this? And now you've found out these positions, where do we go from there?
So the next step, we use these healthy couples to help us develop our initial recommendations. We had no idea how the spine moved or how active the muscles were during sex. There was no data on this until now. The next phase is to do data collections with low back pain patients and essentially test the effectiveness of our initial recommendations and refine those to further develop our guidelines.
And do you think this is going to be, widely received research? Is it going to be positively received? I can imagine it would affect quite a lot of people's relationships with their partner where something like this kind of changed.
Given the striking percentages of men and women who not only have back pain but report this severely affecting their sex lives, we do believe that this work is going to be impacting the quality of life of many people.
We've been talking about sex mainly and sex positions, but can this kind of work on the spine and how the spine moves doing different physical activities be applied to other things in life, so sleeping or playing sport and things like that?
Yes, I definitely think that the idea is really to avoid the movements and the postures that are triggering your back pain. And so we are essentially applying those principles to sex.